Hello, everybody. My name is Ratnos, and today we have Dinar update, big Dinar update, and then also a bunch of 11.1.7 news and discussion and stuff, including the one-button rotation that is coming with 11.1.7. So a lot of stuff to cover. Let's start off with Dinars, though, because Dinars, I think, are the most pressing thing, at least the soonest thing. The one-button thing has definitely gotten a lot of news as well. I think rightly so. Blizzard has announced that M+ dungeon trinkets will be available on the Dinar vendor, and you can get them on the Myth track as well. Let's read through this. So when the Turbo Boost event goes live on May 13th, it will include some additional opportunities for players who prefer Mythic Plus dungeons. By the way, since my last video on this, just in case you haven't been keeping track, they've updated the Dinars already a little bit, which is you can get your first purchase that week, and you can get 3 total purchases. So you can get them week 1, 4, and 7 if you do the quests every week of once the Turbo Boost comes out, instead of just weeks 3 and 6. So they buffed the acquisition in that way. And this is now a further buff in, first of all, the weekly quest will now provide players a choice between killing 4 raid bosses and completing 4 M+ dungeons. I wonder if this will include mix and match, like if you could do 2 raid bosses and 2 keys. But either way, you can get your Dinars from either of these pathways. And additionally, the vendor will offer a selection of trinkets from Season 2 dungeons in addition to the previously planned items. Great. I think this is a huge, good change. And in fact, this is now one way that the Dinar system is going to be better than the Faded and Awakened versions of the Dinar systems. There are still a lot of ways that it's worse, but it is now at least better in one cool and meaningful way. So that is exciting. That is a nice change here. Purchasing Hero Track dungeon trinkets or Hero Track raid gear will have no requirements other than the currency cost. This means regardless of how you obtained them, you can exchange them for Hero Track raid or Hero Track dungeon trinkets. The Myth Track dungeon trinkets will require both the currency and having beaten the timer in all Season 2 M+ dungeons at 12 or higher, having unlocked the Resilient Keystone system, and of course, the Myth Track raid gear will require both the currency and a victory over the item's associated boss in Mythic difficulty, Liberation of Undermine. Our goal here is to ensure players who enjoy M+ dungeons have a way to use this new event to obtain items they may have been chasing for weeks. As always, thank you very much for your feedback. So yeah, this is a move in a good direction. Note that they made it easier to get the raid items as well on the Hero Track, because you now no longer have to kill the boss at all. You can just get the raid Hero Track gear. So if you're a pure M+er, you can now access Hero raid gear without killing the bosses at all. The old version of this that they announced, you could have done it from LFR anyways, so that's pretty much free as well, just a little bit of a time cost if you were a pure M+er. So what does this mean? Is this good? Well, it's better. I think it is still bad that you can't get the Myth Track raid trinkets through a more attainable pathway than killing the associated boss on Mythic, especially because all of the good raid items come from bosses 6, 7, and 8 of this tier. If this was last tier, at least you'd be able to get, Sareki Zealot's Insignia and Rashanan Cloak from doing, say, a 4 out of 8 Mythic. But this tier, if you can kill... First of all, if you can kill 4 bosses in Mythic this tier, you're killing Styx Bunkchunker on Mythic, which, even to this point, is still a quite challenging feat. Even Rick Reverb on Mythic is quite challenging to kill. So compared to, say, timing all the dungeons on level 12, I think Rick Reverb is somewhat harder than that. Styx Bunkchunker, massively harder than that. Sprocketmonger Lockenstock, way, way, way harder than that. And then those are the bosses that don't even give you good items right yet. And then One-Armed Bandit. One-Armed Bandit Mythic is... a couple hundred guilds in the world still have killed that boss at this point. Obviously, more guilds will kill it over time, but we're talking about a level of difficulty way higher than doing all the dungeons at 12 or higher to get access to that raid loot. So if you are somebody who is a raider, but you are in a guild that is 3 out of 8 Mythic, you are doing content way harder than the M+ side of this, but you are getting the worst rewards still. Or what might happen is you're purchasing the raid items because they're really good on the Hero Track. The other issue I have with this system is because you only get 3 purchases, if you are somebody who is progressing either raid or M+, and you purchase, you're put in this awkward spot where, like, say you're progressing One-Armed Bandit when the system comes out. Are you supposed to buy a hero track Eye of Kazan, a hero track Jaster Diamond with the first week's, Dinar? Or are you supposed to buy like a myth track, Signet of the Priory or something like that instead? If you buy any of those items, that's one of your 3 Dinar purchases. You don't get a lot of those. And if you want to buy, weapon, Jaster Diamond, and 1 trinket, that uses all of them. So if you spend any of that on hero track stuff, you're just going to miss out then on being able to do a myth track purchase later down the line. So I don't know. I think that this is still not great. I think on the merits, this is still worse than the Awakened and Faded versions of this. I understand that Blizzard wants to make this less generous than the Faded and Awakened versions. I would say they've already accomplished that by dropping it 3 months into the patch instead of day 1 of the patch, or 3 weeks into the patch like it was in Shadowlands Faded. But I think that this is still... it's closer. It's really nice that you can get deterministic access to Myth Track M+ trinkets that you really want. I think that's a really nice improvement to this. But I think that the accessibility of the Myth Track raid gear, and especially given that lack of accessibility, the fact that you can't retroactively upgrade the hero track ones that you buy into Myth Track ones, is still going to leave a pretty bitter taste in a lot of players' mouths, and in a lot of committed players that are enjoying the game, that are playing for a long time, and that are maybe a little bit slower to progress through the raid. People that are getting late cutting edge. I think it's a real shame that this system makes those players feel worse when those are like players that I think would be really good to make feel better with a system like this. I think that it's closer, though. It's definitely closer in a lot of cases. For some specs, you want 2 M+ trinkets. Great. You're totally set now. And I think it's actually going to be really fun to go and get the, there are going to be a lot of players who now they're going to have a fun quest of, say you've just been farming 10s this season, or, you've just been doing keys at, 6s, but you could maybe push up to 12s. Now you have a big incentive to do that, an even bigger incentive. And once you get all the 12s, now it's like, okay, well, if I can do 4 13s, I can get, the Keystone Hero thing or Legend, whatever. I forget all the different names they have for them, and get that achievement for 3K, right? And I think that's a really cool stepping stone that they put here. I just don't think that the raid side is in a good place yet still. I think that requiring the specific boss to be killed, rather than, say, a certain number of mythic bosses killed, right? Say, 4, right? Killing mythic sticks and then being able to get all the mythic raid items, I think, if you really wanted to keep the mythicness there. Or just making it so that you... this comes from Heroic, right? You kill the Heroic bosses. The last 2 on Heroic drop Gilded Crests, right? They... those bosses... I don't know, they're supposed to be a bridge, right, between the heroic and mythic levels, and I think this late in the season, it would be fair to say, okay, you want a mythic House of Cards, kill heroic One-Armed Bandit, and 4 months into the season when you get your Dinar, you can purchase that thing on mythic, and then same with Mugsy and Gallywix, because heroic Gallywix is hard. Heroic Gallywix is comparable difficulty to doing 12 or higher. If you told me, hey, go pug heroic Gallywix, or go pug a +12 key, which of those am I going to be able to accomplish more reliably? It's probably the 12 key. I don't know. I mean, both are doable but difficult to pug, and it depends on your IO and whether you can get invited to the good groups that are out there, blah, blah, blah. But those are comparable levels of difficulty, in my opinion. So, I don't know. I would say either make this a heroic requirement, or if you really want this requirement, maybe you could have a system where it's okay, if you kill the mythic boss, you can buy, you can get the Myth Track dungeon trinkets through this pathway, or you can get the raid trinkets through this pathway, or once you've killed Mythic Gallywix, you can also get all the M+ trinkets, and once you've timed all the dungeons at 14 or 15, you can get all the raid trinkets, something like that, right? A system where it's okay, here's another pathway to doing this. I think those sorts of, making it so that if you these are the current benchmarks you need for them, and then if you exceed them, you can get the other side of the track as well, right? Mythic Gallywix gives you all the dungeon trinkets, and 14 or 15 dungeons, something like that, gives you all the raid trinkets. I think that would be another way. If they, again, I'm trying to come up with suggestions that are like, okay, if you really want to be stingy about this, if I was Blizzard, I would just implore you, like, please don't be this stingy. You are hurting a set of players that, you know, it's not me. I've killed Mythic Gallywix. I could buy the items myself, but there are a large set of players who are committed and love this game and will never have any hope of killing Mythic One-Armed Bandit Plus, and seeing that they can just never get these items when they're so good, they're so great, such great items, and obviously they can get them on Hero Track. They're just 12 eye levels worse or whatever, but 12 eye levels is it feels bad. It feels really bad to be down that many eye levels. Again, even though it's, you know, maybe only 1% or something on the sim. That feels much worse than it is. And again, given that it is only 1% on the sim, it wouldn't be that bad to just let people have them. So that's going to be my last, you know, I guess, opinion piece on Dinars, unless they change it again. I'm going to try and not derail all my videos by talking about it, but that is my official take on the Dinars. This is a good change. It is still a system that could be great, and is instead going to be good for some players and feel really bad for a lot of others. All right, let's move on to talking about the legacy of Arathor, patch 11.1.7, where I'm going to move my camera over to this side so that you can see some of the text that it was hiding. So what do we have in 11.1.7? There's a new campaign in the Arathi Highlands, and you can get some tabards and shoulders and stuff. There's lore walking, which is if you're level 10 or higher, you can do repeatable quest chains that include some previous quests and a few new ones, either to meet the Ethereals, travel to the Netherstorm to fight Dementius, meet up with Illyria and Locust Walker and Legion, head to Shadowlands, meet the Brokers, gain access to Tazavesh. You also meet up with Venari. Xalatath's storyline, you can do the Legion, Blade of the Black Empire. Maybe this is just the Shadow Priest artifact quest line. See Xalatath gaining her body in BFA, and go back to when Xalatath and Carapace and Azoth cutscene, I guess. The Nyalotha part of that storyline. And then Face to Pass with Arthas, Stratholme, Culling of Stratholme, Wrath of the Lich King, and then the ICC Lich King fight. This seems really cool to me. I don't know what the rewards are going to be for this. I kind of hope there's a cool reward for like doing each of these at least once. But I think this is a really good way so that if you're a WoW player who's been playing for like 4 years, right, and you've played Shadowlands, Dragonflight, and now some War Within, there's a lot of characters that you've seen some of, but not their whole storyline, right? Like Xalatath, you haven't seen her Legion and BFA stuff. Ethereals, Illyria, you haven't seen the Legion side of that as well, and I guess the TBC, Dementius and TBC. And then obviously you haven't seen any of the Arthas stuff, so giving players who are either interested in the lore or, you know, joining the game later an ability to actually go and kind of catch up with potentially important characters, or maybe, I mean, at least Xalatath we know is important. We don't know about Ethereals, and presumably Arthas is not coming back, although you never know. But it just is an iconic WoW storyline. This is a cool system. I don't know. I will see what kind of reward support there is for it, or if it's just something that you can do for fun. I think as long as if there is a reward, I hope it's obviously not power, but just some kind of, you know, neat little title or cosmetic for doing them all, something like that. Overcharged Delves. Things are about to become even more dangerous in Delves for you and Bran. There's a new Delve-specific affix to 6 Delves to push you to new feats of heroism or to earn more shiny loot. So half of the Delves are getting an Overcharged Delves, where you can get rare new enemies, more traps, and you get a new trait-specific tree, or trait tree specific to Overcharged Delves. Selecting the right traits can turn the tide of traps by making them more beneficial rather than a detriment to your progress. So interesting. Like, I wonder if the 4 bountiful Delves each day will have 2 overcharged and 2 not. The fact that they picked one of the 2 new Delves for that makes me think that's pretty likely. And there's some new rewards from this as well. There's a Titan Disc Belt that you can upgrade through a weekly quest, an overcharged mech suit, new gear, and more Delves currency. Now, oops, I didn't mean to click that. They didn't say in this post, but I think in a later blue post, they said they wanted this to be optional. So that, we don't know what this Titan Disc Belt is. We don't know if this is a new Cersei Circlet, because obviously if it's at that power level, this won't be optional, right? This will be something that you will feel obligated to do because it'll be a good item going into the new tier. Hopefully this is just something where it's like, this is an item that's like maybe hero track that works in delves, that's like stronger in delves, something like that. And we leave it there. We don't take something up to eye level 700 or whatever, like Cersei's Circlet would have been. So hopefully that's where this is. And yeah, this would be cool. Cool way to make the delves more fun. Get more delve currency, maybe more crests as well. Could be a good point in the season. Crests are uncapped anyways. Just let us gain even more crests if we do the overcharge delves instead of the regular ones. Cool. Then there's the new UI options, the Combat Assistant and the Single Button Assistant. The Combat Assistant is a new feature that highlights the recommended next ability based on the resources and the situation your character's in. It's designed to help new players who are trying out a new spec, or those looking for additional guidance on the abilities they should use without the need to turn to third-party apps or outside guides. This new feature is configured as an additional option that's part of the base UI to assist you with a damage rotation, no matter which specialization you're using. Cool. I think this is basically functionality that exists if you download Hikili right now as an add-on. And I think bringing it into the game, especially because this particular feature is something that would be used largely by the set of the player base that is least interested in downloading add-ons. So I think this is really nice, right? Like this is, the new players, the players who are just getting into the game. I think this is going to be a really good way to, kind of get started with a new spec. If somebody's like, hey, do you want to do a key? And you look and you're like, I've already done a key on all my characters. Ooh, except for this character, but I haven't played it yet. I've never DPS'd on this guy before, right? And they need a DPS, and you can be like, okay, let me just turn on Combat Assistant for this key and see. I kind of have it hold my hand a little bit and highlight the spells to cast next. Obviously, a huge part of how good and useful this is will be based on how good the Blizzard's ability to tell you what your next spell should be. But from what I've seen in 11.1.7 so far, it's a little bit better than I would have actually expected at clicking the right buttons. Here's the most controversial part. Both of these are controversial, but the single button assistant. In addition, a single button assistant can be used to cast the next recommended ability in the sequence. This assistant is designed to have a small additional GCD added between abilities so that it is still useful for learning new skills, aiding those who are looking for additional help, or for those who want to experience the story or game on a more casual basis. It will also detect when an AoE spell or multi-target ability should be used. So the current GCD penalty on this is, it was originally going to be 0.2 seconds, it looked like, and already on PTR now it looks like it's 0.3 seconds. This may be subject to further change. 0.2 seconds, if you had no haste and you weren't a haste scaling GCD spec, represented about a 12% GCD nerf, whereas 0.3 seconds, about an 18% GCD nerf. So it's a sizable nerf to how much, globals you can get per second. And then, of course, there's also the big thing, which is how much worse is the buttons it's pressing than the optimal rotation versus how much better is it than the buttons you'd be pressing if you were trying to do it yourself, right? And depending on the player, that gap can be wide or small. For some players, this might be a DPS increase, but I think it's important that they have the GCD penalty be big enough that if you are actively trying to learn a spec, but you're not particularly good at it just yet, you should hopefully do a lot better with Combat Assistant on and clicking your own buttons than with Single Button Assistant on and not clicking your own buttons. I think there's a pretty big danger where if this is actually better for those types of players, that would be bad. However, as long as that's not true, I think this is a good feature to have in the game for those new players, but not so much for new players, for a set of new players and existing players that just want to opt out of learning a rotation. There's sort of this, a lot of the people that are opposed to this sort of viscerally don't like the idea of being able to play WoW without doing that work and without, engaging with the game that way, particularly because for a lot of us, that's one of the biggest ways that we engage with WoW, right? One of the biggest ways that you are good at WoW is based on which buttons you click, right? Like it's kind of one of three things of, which buttons you click, where your character is standing, and I guess there's kind of only two things, right? There's kind of only two things in WoW. I guess your character's gear and stuff is the other big thing, right? Like, and knowing how to make your character have good gear and things. So removing that from the game for players that want to opt out of it. I think there are some people who are like, no, you shouldn't be able to opt out of that, right? Like, to me, I see this as, it's pretty similar to like the guardrails in a bowling alley, right? Those go up and all of a sudden you don't really need to worry about where you're rolling the ball anymore. Like, yeah, you can still do a little bit, but now you're just having fun, right? You're not really playing bowling anymore. You kind of are, but like, it's a huge nerf to the difficulty of bowling. And I think single button assistance kind of similar. Like, now all you're worried about is where you're standing and where you're moving, but also you're still worried about defensives and living and kicking stuff and things like that. Now, I hope that they again land the GCD nerf to be big enough that nobody good ever considers this on a fight like a heroic. I hope that something that never gets said in a heroic raid is just turn on a single button assistant and then focus on living, because we'll just kill the boss if we do that. And I'm a little bit worried that even maybe at 0.3 seconds, that might be true for some groups and some players. And I think that would be a pretty dangerous thing to be true. So hopefully they land the nerf in the right spot where like it doesn't feel awful to use this. You're not doing 0 DPS or whatever. You don't feel like a burden for clicking this. But also there aren't cases where people who don't want to use this feel obligated to, because there's a lot going on in a raid boss fight, and even just living and standing in the right place and doing the mechanics is overloading their brain a lot. Like, I'm thinking about, if you're, say, the BM Hunter on Mythic One-Armed Bandit shooting the coins, how many BM Hunters on Mythic One-Armed Bandit would be better off with a single button assistant handling their rotation at a GCD penalty, and then just focusing fully on moving their character? I think it's important that that number is low, and hopefully pretty close to 0. I wonder if that's something that's impossible to do, to land a GCD penalty that is big enough to make that true, but also small enough that, people who actually want to use this don't feel like it's awful, right? I'm curious. My guess was that 0.2 seconds wasn't enough. I'm curious if 0.3 seconds is. Maybe that's a better place to land on this. But yeah, provided that that's not true. I think if that ends up being true, they gotta fix that, right? If it ends up being true that there's widespread cases of people feeling obligated to turn this thing on, that would be bad. But the people who just want to use this for accessibility reasons, or for just whatever personal reasons people have to not want to turn on easy mode on the game, I think easy modes in games are great and fine. As somebody who would never turn it on myself, I think that is especially in an MMO. We want this game to be big. If you are somebody who hates the idea of ever turning on single button assistant, you will still be better off if more people are playing World of Warcraft, and there's now more, money and dev time and stuff going into World of Warcraft, and all those things are, if there were 100 million people playing WoW, you'd be getting more stuff than if there's 1 million people playing WoW. And something like this, if done correctly, can help with that, even if you're somebody who would never use this yourself, which, I guess I'll probably use it for content at some point, but I would never use this aside from that end, and I still think it's a good thing to experiment with. But again, it is definitely dangerous. That GCD penalty does need to be well calibrated, and it kind of depends on how bad the rotation is, because the worse the rotation that it does, the less the GCD penalty has to be, right? But the main important thing is like, how much of a damage loss is it relative to not an optimal rotation, but a realistic rotation for the players that would use it. And that needs to still be a nerf rather than a buff to be doing this. Both of these options should aid in lowering the barrier of entry for new players. As with the new cooldown manager, it will continue to evolve over time. Yeah, cooldown manager came out in a pretty... you could tell, like, okay, this is not done yet, right? Like this, there's a lot of ways that, especially just making it a little bit more customizable, but even just like the options and how it showed different things, and a lot of bugs and stuff. And I think that one thing that Blizzard, there was this interview, if you haven't seen it, with me, Max, and Ian Hazakostas about this and their add-on philosophy in general. And we don't see stuff about their add-on philosophy in here, but they have a goal of basically making it so that if you're a new player, you don't feel like you have to go and download a bunch of add-ons to play the game. And a lot of that is going to involve moving functionality that these add-ons bring into the base UI. And it is very important not just that they have these ideas, but specifically that they implement them well and that they continue to update them patch over patch. Rotations change a lot patch over to patch. There's a lot of specs in the game. They need to make sure that they are basically it's not just biting off more than they can chew, but they need to make sure that they're biting off something that they are committing to chew every new patch with all of these things, with cooldown manager, with combat assistant, with single button assistant. This is a lot of maintenance. Anybody who's if you ever talk to like a Wowhead guide writer, all the updates they have to do every single patch. Now Blizzard is basically committing to staying on top of all that with all of these systems as well. And I think there's a lot of trepidation from the community that like, hey, starter talent builds have been sort of added along these lines and then left by the wayside, right? And largely don't get updated when talents get updated, when good builds are changing, and now there's like huge mistakes in some of these starter builds, right? And like you look at that and you're like, okay, is that going to be true for combat assistant as well? Even if the combat assistant rotation is decently good for my spec right now, is it going to be updated when all these things change in 11.2? 12.1, 12.2, are they actually going to be able to stay on top of that? And I think it's very reasonable if you're a member of the community to look at that and be like, well, historically, these sorts of things have not always happened. And yeah, if you're Blizzard, it's very important that doesn't happen with these add-on replacement options, especially once they take any steps that restrict how much add-ons can do of these things, because that's another thing that they're looking to do is eventually, or maybe not eventually, it's hard to tell with what they actually want to do and the time scale they want to do this on. But at some point, there's a lot of functionality that add-ons currently have that they are looking to take away from add-ons and have be done by base UI things. And it's not a disaster if these features aren't updated patch over patch. It's not as much of a disaster until they remove the functionality for us to fix it with our own add-ons. As soon as they do that, it goes from being important to being like vital that these features stay good and stay current with each game patch. So that is a lot of work. Blizzard is taking on a lot of work on themselves with how frequently this game updates. It's going to be a huge amount of responsibility that they are taking that they previously had the add-on developers doing. And the end goal here is going to be that if you're a new player, you no longer have this experience after playing WoW for a bit where it's like, oh man, I have to download these 20 add-ons to play the game. That is an admirable goal, but there are a lot of ways that they could screw this up in a big way if they're not careful. So hopefully they are careful with it. And then some changes to the cooldown manager, blah, 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 no issue. That is all for the patch notes. There are, however, some Wowhead posts of some other stuff that's been data mined or seen now that the 11.1.7 PTR is up. First of all, there is a new event called Collector's Bounty. We're providing a Collector's Bounty buff, which will aid players in the hunt for legacy loot by increasing drops in legacy content throughout Azeroth. We'll share more details when we're closer to its release. So if you are somebody who does some collecting, or maybe you are sometimes do some collecting, whenever this thing's up, maybe this will be a super exciting time to go and chase down, Scythe of the Unmaker or whatever other cosmetics. Pretty cool thing that might be coming with 11.1.7, have sort of these legacy run weeks whenever this is out. Cool. And then we have a first look at some of the mounts and cosmetics coming in 11.1.7. We have a Celestial Serpent mount, some chess mounts that are maybe themed around like the Karazhan chess event. This Forsaken Horse, which looks really cool. I especially like this blue version here. The Overcharged Golem, which is a reward likely from Overcharged Delves. Looks, it's a skeleton we've seen before, but I think this is a cool version of it. And then the Pirate Dragon, likely a reward from BFA Time Walking, which is coming. Let's see, BFA Time Walking is coming in 11.1.7 as well, slipping into the Turbulent Timeways again. And then we are going to have a 6-week event beginning and ending with BFA of new Turbulent Timeways. Now, this is not, it's not an event that I've actually partaken in myself, but it is historically a good signifier of when the patch is going to come. Not 11.1.7, but when 11.2 will come will likely be the week after the Turbulent Timeways ends. Historically, that's been how it goes. So you can look for whenever the first week of this is going to be, and that can give us a good approximation of when the 11.2 might come out. Now, historically, they've been about 8-week patches. So if Turbulent Timeways comes out right when 11.1.7 comes out, that might be an indication that it's actually only going to be a 6-week patch. On the other hand, if we can see Turbulent Timeways begins on week 3 of 11.1.7, that might give us information that 11.2 is likely to be, right after the BFA week. We'll have to see, but that's the main reason I personally am keeping my eye on this, because I can't be bothered doing these turbulent time walking events. I get too bored time walking. Okay, we also have some new HD recolors of Tier 2. There's already been, of course, the HD versions of Tier 2, but now there's some recolors coming out, including a pretty cool red version of the Paladin Judgment Armor. There's obviously the purple recolors of the original Tier 2, but I think it's cool that they're doing a red recolor of this one. I like this recolor of the Priest one, too. And yeah, if you're a fan of these for your class, we'll see exactly how these are earned. They'll be available as part of the Greedy Emissary event, I guess. So that's the same time that collector buff is going to be coming out. So we'll see exactly what that ends up being. But yeah, I think that is it for our video today. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Big video, a lot of topics to cover in this, a lot of controversy on them too. But I'm sure that we're all going to be civil in the comments. And I'm especially sure that the people who are going to type uncivil things have stayed all the way to the end of this video and will heed this advice. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.